the devil. And there's one sign that reads, "No government counselor in my home." The U.S. Senate doesn't take its recess for another week. But Democratic Senator Arlen Specter got a taste of what his time off might be like at recess during a town hall event that he held in Philly yesterday with Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius.
I am not a member of Congress, have never been. That's just a fact. I'm just telling you. My observation is I have never seen members of Congress work harder on it. It is unacceptable to me for somebody to reform our healthcare system and stop the system that we have now where insurance companies basically get to pick and choose.
We actually had to narrow down the pile of footage that we had like this from just the last few days in order to figure out what to show in the time that we had available on the show. We could have spent the entire hour just showing tape like this. But the more time you spend looking into this seemingly organic outrage at these town hall meetings, the more clear it is that this isn't organic at all. This is orchestrated outrage. There is a script for this stuff that was written before these events happened, and that appears to be instructions to people to shut down these efforts at civic discourse. The website Think Progress obtained a leaked memo from a group that calls itself Right Principles. The 3-page memo details how protesters should behave at town hall events. Under the heading Inside the Hall, it says, quote, "You need to rock the boat early in the representative's presentation. Watch for an opportunity to yell out and challenge the representative's statements early. If he blames Bush for something or offers other excuses, call him on it, yell back, and have someone else follow up with a shout out. The goal is to rattle him." Also, quote, "When the formal Q&A session begins, get all your hands up and keep them up. The balance of the group should applaud when the question is asked, further putting the representative on the defensive." Who's giving these rent-a-mob instructions like this? Well, that memo was written by a man named Bob McGuffey. Bob McGuffey is affiliated with an organization called FreedomWorks. FreedomWorks is a Washington, D.C. lobbying firm run by former Republican Majority Leader Dick Armey. Corporate lobbyists are organizing far-right hooligan tactics to disrupt civic meetings about health care reform. This is the organized use of intimidation as a political tool in the United States. And I don't mean intimidation euphemistically. I mean literal intimidation. New York Congressman Tim Bishop, who we showed you earlier, he ended up having to be escorted to his car by 5 police officers for his own safety after his town hall event was over. And this type of harassment is not just reserved for elected officials. Check out what happened at a Syracuse, New York town hall meeting when a man who supports a single-payer healthcare system stood up at one of these events to ask why his congressman wasn't supporting single-payer.
It's cheaper. It would cover everyone. We have 45 million people who are uninsured. Congressman Fay, 90 people who have signed on in the United States Congress. 11 of them going
to you. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
Timing out for action. Why won't you co-sponsor HR 676 and support single-payer universal health care?
This type of tactic, this type of intimidation is a deliberate choice, and it appears to be stoked and organized by corporate lobbyists. And it is not something that is happening in a vacuum. Let me give you another example of what's being passed off as politics right now by lobbying interests on the political right. When the climate change bill came before the House last month, a Democratic congressman named Tom Perello of Virginia received a letter purportedly from a nonprofit Hispanic group in his district, and the letter urged him to oppose the cap-and-trade legislation. He received similar letters from what were purportedly his local branches of the NAACP. Only these letters weren't actually from that Hispanic group in his district or the NAACP. A Republican lobbying firm in Washington has admitted to impersonating those local nonprofits and sending Congressman Perello fake letters to get him to oppose the climate change legislation. Congress is now investigating this incident. This is a lobbying firm. This is The establishment. This isn't a lone nut job passing himself off as a group he doesn't belong to. This is well-paid lobbyists doing this as a strategy. It's the same thing with the deathers, the scare-your-grandmother myth that the whole point of healthcare reform is secretly to kill old people. This patently false rumor about healthcare reform, as we've talked about earlier on this show, was started by a woman who sits on the board of directors of one of the nation's biggest medical device companies. Everybody says, oh, politics ain't beanbag, right? Obviously, this is not beanbag. But this isn't hardball either. No offense to Chris. This just isn't even politics. This is orchestrated mob mentality intimidation. This is called hooliganism. As the prospects for health reform in America this past year have flowed and ebbed and ebbed and flowed, three prime guaranteed to enrage immovable facts of our current system have kept would-be reformers motivated. The cost of private health insurance, the callousness of the big insurance companies toward their customers and the country, and the executive compensation packages for CEOs and bigwig executives at those companies, even as they provide worse and worse service to fewer and fewer Americans. Those things have been very motivating. In recent weeks, when momentum behind health reform was starting to wane, fresh new data came to light that was, frankly, consistent with all the old data, but it was a great reminder of what was wrong with the system in the first place, why it needed to be fixed in the first place. And back came the momentum. And when the momentum came back, the momentum for reform came back, so did the anti-reform forces. Even the deathers came back, though this time they came back with a twist. Check it out. Before the summer of the screaming town hall, before death panels and fake grassroots anti-health reform bus tours, outrage in the country, before all of that, was fueling the movement for health reform. That outrage was aimed at the insurance industry for jacking up rates and denying people coverage and dropping sick people from their rolls. Prepare to return to that quaint time, because thanks to a report out today from the advocacy group Healthcare for America Now, we have just learned that the 5 largest for-profit insurers in this country made a combined $12.2 billion last year. For those of you keeping track at home, that is a 56% increase from 2008, a new profit record, set, of course, in the middle of the worst economic decline since the Great Depression. They accomplished this record feat, at least in part, by covering 2.7 million fewer people through private insurance than they did before. It's as if someone has pushed the reset button on the politics of health reform. Once again, the country finds itself in a forced confrontation with the reason that health reform is so needed. And again, like we're back to, I guess, last summer again, the right has responded to the threat that health reform poses to the status quo by propounding the theory that health reform is really a secret plot to kill people. In this case, they say it's a secret plot to kill ex-presidents.
Medical rationing. It's a big concern under the Democrats' proposed health reform. Would President Clinton have been denied his heart stent procedure under their plan?
President Bill Clinton is now home, and after undergoing emergency surgery yesterday, the president's had 2 stents placed in his coronary artery. Amazing. So if the Democrats' health care reform had gone through, would President Clinton have received the stents?
Does President Clinton, or you or I who needs it, get the stent under that new regimen of health care effectiveness?
Welcome to the new health reform debate, same as the old health reform debate. Only instead of health reform being a secret plot to kill old people, or a secret plot to kill veterans, or a secret plot to kill Republicans, now health reform is a secret plot to kill Bill Clinton. That's the story on the right. The story everywhere else is about insurance companies like Anthem Blue Cross, the largest insurer in the most populous state in the country, California, hiking its rates 39% right now, just because they can, even though their parent company is making billions in profit. So far tonight, we have documented the origin of various myths and rumors and campaigns and self-proclaimed movements against health reform. But the story of this endgame in health reform is incomplete if it does not shed light on the performance of our elected officials, many of whom have contradicted themselves and stretched the truth and flat out lied in an effort to keep things just the way they are, in an effort to stop reform. We will always do all that we can to expose the audacity of nope here on this show. That effort continues when we come back. One thing thing to be against health reform. Lots of reasons say to like the current system, or to not like the proposed fixes, or to have an idea that you think might be better than the proposed fixes for making the aforementioned fix. That's all part of the debate. Arguments like that are why we have an oppositional, debate-based system of legislating. It makes us stronger in the end. It makes for better policy. Opposition, vigorous argument, good. Lying, bad. Lying about what's being proposed, lying about how the legislating process works, even lying about your own record on matters being debated as part of health reform, not okay, not helpful. Fortunately, there is a price to be paid for such bad behavior. The price is that the lies, and you, the liar, get made fun of, sometimes even on TV. Health reform is going to pass. It's going to pass. It passed the House already before Christmas. It passed the Senate on Christmas Eve with 60 votes. The next step is to bridge the differences between the two bills so the president can get something on his desk to sign. In order to do that, two things will happen. First, the House will pass the Senate version of the bill, and then there will be a small package of tweaks to that bill that will be passed by the Democrats under majority rule.